Welcome to another episode of Talking College Football with JJ Kitchen. Of course, I'm your host, JJ Kitchen. Groundbreaking news over yesterday going into today, Monday. Crazy time period, obviously, for college athletics, but more breaking ground news. Ross Dellinger drops a bomb really on a really Sunday evening going into Monday about the college football playoff expanding to potentially 14 to 16 teams. It's pretty much almost done. But the details of it all and the automatic bids, SEC 4, the Big 10 getting 4 automatic bids, ACC 2, and the Big 12 2, Group of 5 1, and then maybe 1 at large bid is something to talk about. But there's more in between avenues of where who really has control. And as of right now, the SEC and the Big 10 have really gained control. And we get a number of different aspects tonight of how we're going to dive into it, really break it down to give you the information that you need. But also, too, some pretty interesting back and forth between Pat Ford, Dan Wenzel. We'll go into a little bit of that. Obviously, their podcast was great, but there's one thing, obviously, you run through there, and the same thing with Ross Dellinger's article. We're going to break it down here tonight. But obviously, first, the show is sponsored by two great people. First, Colonial Beer, located at 4986 Library Road in Bethel Park, PA, 15102. Tremendous people overall. They're incredible. Go in there and see them today, especially for, obviously, the Super Bowl just happened. USA versus Canada game just happened. We got another game coming up in Boston. Obviously, make sure you get your beer from Colonial Beer. Great people. More importantly, a small business. Help them out. And also, too, Thompson Law Group with Brian Thompson. Call them at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Brian is one of the best because he cares about you, the individual. Unlike the larger law firms, Brian truly cares about your individual results and what you need to be successful. Make sure you call Thompson Law Group and Brian Thompson at 724-799-8404 or visit them at thompsonattorney.com. Well, first up, obviously, the groundbreaking news from yesterday we talked about breaking. It's going to get really done this week. We expect it to from the meetings and whatnot. If Ross Dellinger has broken news on, obviously, out of Yahoo Sports, we're going to dive into here. I'm going to share my screen to give you guys a look into the article, but more importantly, even give you a little bit of a snippet from their podcast as well. And Pat Ford and Dan Wenzel really go off in terms of what this looks like, the potential of what college athletics and college football looks like because of the SEC getting upset because a 7-5, potentially a 7-5 Alabama team not getting in, obviously because they lost to two teams, 2 6-6 teams, Oklahoma, obviously, and then Vanderbilt really holding them back. There's a real reason why they weren't allowed in the playoff. Obviously, you look at that overall. It's going to be an interesting discussion. But first off, let's share the screen here, obviously going into Ross Dellinger's article and really break it down from the onset because, guys, this is pretty groundbreaking stuff. It's going to change college football from the year 2026 and on. This is the last year of the current format of the college football playoff. If you didn't know, this is the last year of the 12-team playoff. The year after, in 2026, is when you'll see 14 to 16 teams. They're still deciphering which one they want to go with. More people think it's going to be 14 teams. And obviously, too, I think more coaches want 16 teams. I think 14 or 16 is too much. I think 12 was probably just the way to go. But we're going to get into it here because potentially it could be too much. But here we are in college athletics. It's pretty crazy overall. All right, let's dive into it here. Obviously, make sure you guys can see that there. All right, again here, Ross Dellinger sources, SEC and Big 10 building momentum to further expand the college football playoff to 14 to 16 teams. And Ross does a great job out of Yahoo Sports. Last spring, during intense and at times heated negotiations over the future of college football playoff, leaders of the Big 10 and SEC threatened to create their own postseason system if they were not granted a majority of the college football playoff revenue and full authority over the playoff format. In the end, executives of the 10 FBS leagues and Notre Dame signed a memorandum of understanding handing control over the college football's two richest conferences. Soon they are expected to exercise the control. Within SEC and the Big 10, momentum is building to further expand playoffs to 14 or 16 teams, assign multiple automatic qualifiers per league, as many as 4 for themselves, and finalize a scheduling agreement together that may fetch millions in additional revenue from TV partners, sources told Yahoo Sports. The playoff format would change clear the way for SEC administrators to finally make a long-discussed move to play 9 regular season conference games, which would trigger perhaps all 4 power leagues to overhaul their conference championship weekends. One of the biggest things that you'll see out of that is obviously people continually talk about the SEC and the ACC not going to 9 conference games. As you can imagine, they have 8 conference games compared to the Big Ten that has 9 and the Big 12 that has 9 conference games. Obviously, the 8 conference games helps the ACC, obviously, in terms of their overall matchups. Obviously, Clemson, South Carolina, those rivalries in there, Georgia Tech, Georgia, Louisville and Kentucky. I mean, just over and over a number of different cross rivalries between the SEC and the between the SEC and the ACC, along with other opportunities within the Big Ten spectrum. Obviously, Pitt is facing Wisconsin coming up. They face West Virginia, Cincinnati, UCF. They've faced Tennessee in the past. It's a really good opportunity to create those up-and-coming games, but more really good matchups overall. And you've watched that through the ACC and the SEC. Obviously, the SEC gets a lot of flack, obviously, because towards the end of the year, they really have the Citadel or Sam Houston State, in the last 2 weeks before rivalry weekend, and has really caused a lot of stir in college football. So people have really looked at that as an opportunity where, hey, we can bash the SEC. They need to get to 9 conference games. This really puts them in the realm of 9 conference games. These ideas and concepts previously reported by Yahoo Sports as possibilities are now serious agenda items within the highest governing bodies of the SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12 and ACC, according to officials from each of those leagues. The 11 members of the College Football Playoff Management Committee, the 10 FBS conference commissioners, and Notre Dame's athletic director were contacted for this story, many of them confirming the existence of these potential ideas, but declining specific comment on the matter. Financial decisions are expected in the coming weeks. SEC and Big Ten athletic directors will meet Wednesday in New Orleans for the second time in the last 5 months. Big 12 athletic directors are expected to discuss the future playoff format at meetings this week. And ACC athletic directors as well as presidents met last week in Charlotte, North Carolina. The College Ball Playoff Committee is scheduled to meet February 25th in Dallas, where an SEC and Big Ten could present ideas for a future format. A consensus recommendation for the 2 leagues may establish this week in New Orleans. Obviously, now here's really the big part here. SEC's Big Ten's control and possible proposal. And this is really where things get into the hard nutshell of really where we're going. And of all the fluff, this is what you need to know the most of. Here is really the 2 paragraphs of this entire thing that you look at, you say, okay, here's where we get down to the nuts and bolts and really what's happening overall when it comes to the aspects of college athletics and where we're leading to. The SEC and Big Ten's control and possible proposal. According to most who have viewed the memorandum of understanding from last spring, the SEC and Big Ten hold sole discretion on the future of college football format starting in 2026, the beginning of the college football playoffs' new 6-year television agreement with ESPN that runs through 2031 playoff. That is massive. The agreement grants the league's decision-making powers over the format, but directs them to have meaningful consultation and collect input from other conferences before making their decision. Here's what I got news for you guys. That's great. That's basically a handshake saying, hey, we'll take into account your ideas. The overall consensus is that the SEC and the Big Ten will make decisions going forward. And guess what? They do have all the power now. Now it's over. They truly do have all the power moving forward. They have everything that they need to make everything that they want. Who cares? The ACC, the Big 12, the Group of 5, Notre Dame can certainly put up a fight and say, hey, we want this certain stuff done. That's all well and good. But guess what? Who cares? You've given up all of your rights from anything you have a possibility on to the SEC and the Big Ten. They'll take into account and obviously consideration. But if you're the ACC, the Big 12, or Notre Dame or the Group of 5, here's really my debacle. And I think that and we'll talk about it more going on later on here when Pat Ford talks about it. Why even give this up? Call the bluff of the SEC and the Big Ten. Why would you not push back on this? You're basically giving up rights, obviously, into terms of how many teams can go in there. Because if you have 14 teams that go in, you have 4 qualifiers from the SEC, that's 4. 4 more, that's 8 from the Big Ten. 2 from the ACC, that's 12. 10. Then, obviously, the Big 12 is down to 12. And then 13, one Group of 5. That's 13 teams right there, and then one outlier, which normally will probably be Notre Dame, but they have to make sure they win their games, obviously, because they're in a dilemma, which creates an opportunity where they need to have a conversation if they need to join a conference or not. That's just the fact of the matter. They need to know if they need to join a conference or not because they have to be ranked in the top 14. And again, you can Bet your bottom dollar these guys are going to be talking about their strength of schedule. I can tell you that right now, because their strength of schedule has been a very big question mark from year over year over year. So they're going to try to use that against them. So Notre Dame's going to be in a pocket full of hell because of this overall move, because SEC and the Big Ten have the most to say about this. They have the most in terms of wanting to make sure that their teams make money. As the Big Ten is not in either one of those conferences or the ACC. So they're really on the outside looking in terms of power-wise. They're really screwed on a number of different levels. But overall, if you're from an ACC or a Big 12 fan, obviously myself here, I root for Pitt in the ACC. In terms of relegation, you should have challenged this. To say when people are going to be saying, well, guess what? You have to take what you have to get, because obviously if they break off, good, call their bluff. I mean, the amount of pushback overall, if you were to have two different leagues between the ACC, the Big 12, the Group of Five, and Notre Dame, or potentially Notre Dame slides with the SEC and the Big 10, but they probably could be able to go with them because they're independent. So the SEC and Big 10 have their own playoff, their own league. That's only going to hurt their ratings. That's only going to hurt their viewership. Like what you're going to see in here in a couple clips that I have for you, they're going down a path that's just truly all about money. It's not about college football anymore. It's truly based upon how much money can I get. Obviously, coaches want more teams because they want job security and making sure that they have all the jobs they could possibly have. They want to make sure they have everything that they need to make sure that they have everything from top to bottom in terms of having every opportunity to make more money as they possibly can. If you make the playoff, you'll certainly get more money in terms of bonuses, especially too on win percentage. If you make the playoff, if you make your ACC championship game, now all of a sudden you look at the aspect of, for instance, the SEC. What does it matter how many games you lose outside of your conference now? Non-conference games do not matter at this point, because if you have automatic qualifiers, you've turned this entire college football no longer matters about non-conference games. It does not matter anymore. You could face the hardest teams 4 consecutive weeks, is what probably teams should do. Face those teams as hard as you possibly can to prepare you for your conference schedule, and then win out your conference schedule and you're in. Because if you're in the SEC, if you're in the top 4, you make it into the playoff. If you're in the top 4 in the Big Ten, you make it into the playoff. If you make it into the ACC championship game for the top 2 spots, you're in. And it kind of goes into the consolidation of what's the whole purpose of a Big Ten championship or SEC championship? What's the ACC, the Big 12? What does it matter to have, and a championship game in the conference? It really doesn't matter at this point. As long as you're in the pecking order of 1 through 4, and maybe if the SEC does maybe a bracket of 1 to 4, where each 4 teams, you break it out into 2 weekends where, you have obviously your 1 through 4 seed. You play your 1 through 4, you have like a little bit of a tournament, you play 2 games to find out who the champion is of the conference, or you just eliminate the conference championship overall and you go 1 through 4, and it helps you through your seeding when you go into the college football playoff. There's just numerous questions around this overall that you look at from a standpoint of, does this make any sense? It doesn't. And I think that overall, over time, like anything else, when you're selling a new product, the first couple years, it looks good. It looks good overall because every team has the illusion that they're in it. But the minute the fans begin to look outside and say, really, my team really has no chance overall because of the discrepancy, not because the Big Ten and the SEC have all of the money in terms of the discrepancy between those, the ACC will probably close the gap with the larger brand teams. Your Clemson, your Miami, your Florida State, your North Carolina, those teams, because of viewership, will help them in terms of what's happening in the ACC with the Success Initiative, but also to the Brand Fund, which will certainly help those teams out because they'll be able to stay in the ACC. They'll win as much as they possibly can and have the opportunity to get to the college football playoff. But the question really dissolves around, does really every team have that opportunity? And I think that the ACC and the Big 12, the lack of leadership between those 2 conferences, you should have asked the question. To hell with giving you the opportunity to take all the power. If you want to go off and do your own thing, by all means, go ahead and do it. But I can assure you this, the ACC, the Big 12, the Group of 5, the rest of the country aren't going to be able to watch that because they don't care about those teams, because their teams are not involved. When your teams are fully involved, that's what creates the viewership. But also now, too, you're going to 14, potentially 16 teams. The viewership-wise, you're going up against the NFL. You're not going to beat the National Football League in overall viewership. So expanding the playoff even more is mindless. 12 teams was good enough. 14 teams is too much. 16 teams is too much. Automatic qualifiers is too much. There's too much revolving around that to make it too much guaranteed. You're fourth place if you're fourth place in your division, congratulations. But also, too, if you make the playoff, are you kidding me? As a fourth place team, I can understand if you have automatic qualifiers for your two top teams. Obviously, the two teams that make your SEC championship, the ACC championship, the Big 10 championship. I get that from a perspective. Hey, you have the 4 conferences, you have 8 automatic qualifiers, and then you have 4 at large bids, or technically the group of 5, you give them 1 team in there. You have 3 at large bids. Okay, you have 3 at large bids, and you allow Notre Dame to build herself into there, and then you have 2 more large bids probably going towards the SEC and the Big 10 if they needed to. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the automatic qualifiers kind of just mind-blowing yourself because now you're just trying to find participation trophies of getting your conference into the college football playoff to make more money. And that's what all this comes down to from top to bottom. It's all about the money, and it's destroying college football in general. This goes into another one here. I'm going to share my screen with you guys again. Listen to this here. It got pretty heated overall when it came down to this discussion with Pat Ford and them. Take a listen here, just a short clip of what this sounds like.
For of a 14-team kind of model, and that would be 4 AQs for the SEC and Big 10 each, 2 for the ACC and Big 12, 1 for the group of 5, and 1 at large that would be designated for Notre Dame if they finish in the top 14 of the rankings, according to a memorandum of understanding among the CFB that was signed last spring. So, and part of that memorandum of understanding, as we talked about on the show before, is that the SEC and Big 10 do control the format starting in 2026 in the 6-year agreement, and it's more clear. That's more clear, I think, than ever. I don't have the memorandum of understanding, but there have been portions of it by multiple people that have been read to me, and basically, they have to make meaningful consultation with the other leagues, but they make the decision.
Yeah.
And right now, their decision, which could be finalized this week in their joint meeting, is probably heading toward an expanded playoff with multiple AQs per league.
Yeah. Do you want to know how I feel about this?
Here it goes. Oh, boy.
I think I said it last year. If anything, I'm only more entrenched that this is terrible. This is further greed. This is unchecked power mongering. There's no leadership. There's no leaders. We don't have any leaders. We have strongmen and grifters. That's all we got. We have strongmen and grifters who are running college athletics. They don't give a damn about the whole. They don't give a damn about any other sports. All they want is more money and more control for the top people. That's what the SEC and the Big 10 want most of all. And the ACC and the Big 12 are willing to go along with it because they're going to get 2 bids out of this. And everybody's scared to death that the SEC and the Big 10 are going to go off and do their own thing, to which, again, I say, dare them.
Yeah.
Dare them to do it, because if they really want to go down as the worst people in the history of college sports, that's where they're headed. This is far enough. This is far enough that you are shoving stuff so far down people's throats that nobody is sitting there clamoring to say, God, the playoff was no good. We need more teams and we need more automatic bids for the people that already have all the advantages. Is anybody out there saying that? Then maybe it's the same people that won a 76-team basketball tournament. Where are they? We're going to end up with that. They're going to shove that down our throat too. That's coming. It's great. College athletics is run by wonderful people. My basement also flooded today, so I'm a little bit irritable.
But Pat is completely right. And Dan goes on in that conversation too, that it truly has ruined it because for where we're going. And Dan goes into the conversation of, hey, we're going here because Alabama didn't get in. More than likely, Miami should have been over Alabama or even potentially SMU, but SMU was in a championship game. It was right. And they're trying to take out the selection and taking out the overall speculation and speculating how much goes on in terms of the rankings of 1 to 12, now 1 to 14, potentially 1 to 16. I think it goes to 16 teams because these guys want as many teams as possible in there to create more money. But again, when you're battling the National Football League, you're going to lose. Viewership again was down again because they're battling the NFL. Nobody wants to watch college football over the NFL. They want to watch primetime NFL football. And again, the NFL continually designs where they have everything locked up, especially too when it comes to postseason time in the National Football League. It's about the brand, and NFL designs it. They've owned it. They run it. And you look at them, and again, you talk about Pat. The first thing he says, it's bullshit. You should, if you're the ACC and the Big 12, shame on your leadership overall to where you don't challenge them to leave, because then at that time it's already over. Because then they can go on and do what they want, but they're not going to get as much viewership. So when their viewership drops, the money's going to drop overall, and that's great. You'll have 2 conferences, and that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, that's a lackadaisical overall approach, and it's bound to fail. And the Big 10 and the SEC knew that, but the ACC and the Big 12 and the Group of 5 just allowed it to happen. And that's lack of leadership on their end. That's lack of just having balls overall to make sure you're making the right decision for your conference. It's that simple. And I think it's something that has to be looked overall. So, guys, overall, that's really what it comes down to. Breaking the SEC and the Big 10 just have complete control to at this point, where they have all the advantage, all the revenue. I mean, pretty much, they're leading in every category statistically. If you haven't done so, subscribe to this channel. We'll be dropping more breaking news coming soon, obviously based on Ross Dellinger's reporting. Obviously through our sources as well. Subscribe to the show here, like this video, share it. In the comments section, let me know, do you like this move from 12 to 14, potentially 16 teams? That's 1. 2, do you think that college football is on the potential verge of destruction because of the actual system that we're going to with automatic qualifiers? Also, do you like the qualifiers or not? Let me know your thoughts on what's going on here. Obviously, breaking news here this week, massive shifts. This is going to change the landscape of college football forever. And when 2031 comes, I think that'll be the last time and the last realignment that we see, possibly forever, when it comes down to conference realignment. Guys, make sure, again, subscribe, like the video down below. Thank you so much for your support of the podcast. Obviously, we're growing at a rapid rate. Continue to support the show, and thank you so much. And I love seeing your comments in the comments section. Thank you guys as always. Guys, as always and forever, hail to Pitt and hail to the ACC. I'll see you next time.